Hello and welcome to Collective Tuning, a conversation around how sound shapes the practices of three Indigenous artists. Today I'm honored to be joined by interdisciplinary artist CHERYL Larondel, artist-composer Raven Chacon, and performer musician Laura Ortman. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we discuss your practices, sound in relation to the forming immersive environments, the relationship between these environments and language, and how collaboration informs and invites acts of listening and witnessing. I'll start by introducing myself, and then I'll invite you to introduce yourselves, as well as giving sort of a brief introduction to your practice. So my name is Jenny Western. I'm based here in Winnipeg in Treaty 1. I'm a curator, a writer, an educator of mixed European ancestry, as well as of Oneida and Stockbridge Munsee descent, and a member of the Brotherton Nation of Wisconsin. CHERYL, maybe I'll ask you to go next. First, I want to say, though, congratulations on your honoring Canadian 2021 Governor General's Award for your role as an interdisciplinary artist in Canada for the past 40 years of a practice. That's amazing. And again, so wonderful and honoring to have you here on our panel with us. I'll let you speak a little bit more about that practice as a brief introduction to who you are.
Hei, kädentäskonten. CHERYL Larondel Segason, apituko sanskue omania, niihi oskoiga mistä kuusu iinu oskoio. Miskohti waskaigan egwa papas jeso chiniamaga Saskatoon migwatsnuegan. So in my language, which is Cree, I said that my name is CHERYL Larondel and that I'm mixed blood or half breed. So European and Cree. And I am from, I have family ties and roots to Papaschase First Nation, which is where the city of Edmonton currently sits. I also have family ties to Kikino Métis Colony, which is in northern Alberta. And I currently live in Saskatoon. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, as you mentioned. So that means that I incorporate just a whole bunch of different disciplines to try and create work. Everything from media art to visual, audio art. I'm a singer-songwriter, and I also I'm a sometimes community-engaged artist.
Laura, would you like to go next in introducing yourself briefly?
Sure. Hello. Thanks for having me. My name is Laura Ortman. I live here in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm a White Mountain Apache from East Fork, Arizona. I've been in New York for almost 25 years, and I work as a musician and a hairstylist, and sometimes artist. I play a variety of different instruments, mostly the violin, which I've played for 40 years. Play different kinds of percussion, field recording, piano, guitar, pedal steel. I like to sing through a megaphone. I have kind of a quiet voice sometimes, so I like to sing through a megaphone for that radio texture. And then I work a lot with other musicians, filmmakers, artists, poets, dancers, writers, all kinds of interdisciplinary friends and professionals. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. Thank you all for being here. And Raven, could you introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, I'm Raven Chacon. I'm an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation, but I do other things. I'm a composer. I was trained classically, but ended up doing other kinds of work with sound installations and building instruments and electronics. I write songs. I also work a lot with video and other kinds of projects, installations, visual art, sculptural projects.
That's great. So we get a sense that all three of you have these very diverse practices and with all sorts of different things coming into them. We're focusing on sound today though, so I'm going to ask if we can start by discussing your practices a little more deeply and speaking to specifically how sound has helped shape your work. And I would love to dive in with all of you, but I think I'll start with Laura because I had read that you started, and I think you just spoke to that a little, that you started playing violin as a really little child. Is that true?
I guess I was 7. Yeah, I don't know if that's little nowadays, but yeah, I started maybe a year before everybody else in school, but my grandma was a violinist, and I really wanted to be like her with her permanent smile and attention to detail, and just a lot of warmth and I don't know, just gentle badass.
Did you say gentle badass? That's amazing. So that's where you started. And then how did that sort of get you to where you are today? How did that sound become part of and help to shape your work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I always played the violin. It was a great escape to the harsh reality of being awkward little kid. And but I always just did it kind of like in um, copycatting my grandma and stuff. And I had a really good violin teacher growing up all the way from 5th grade to high school. And then I actually I had this idea where I didn't want music to become work, and so I went to school for art. Everyone said I was pretty good at it and had scholarships. So I studied, sculpture, drawing, metal, all kinds of great things. And then I never really quite found my I guess my thing, you know. I was just scatterbrained and I couldn't decide. And I started making music for performances with costume and light and made my own outfits and installations. I started making music for all of these puppies. And I ended up just kind of being more fascinated, being back in my own comfortable music world. And so I started making music that 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 becomes atmospheres that I could, wrap my hands around. So it helped me work with the moving image and emotion and structure and such. So yeah, very much part of how I am today.
Amazing. Such a long road and feeling like you're very true to yourself and going back and bringing that forward. That's great. Raven, how about you? How do you feel that sound has helped to structure and shape your practice as it is today?
Well, it's kind of my only practice. It's the thing I've always done, or the thing I always wanted to do. Similar to Laura, I took classical lessons at a very young age, piano. We were given the opportunity by a woman when the family moved here to Albuquerque. My sister and I took lessons with this woman, and actually she just came over to the house last weekend to hang out. We're still good friends with her, but she taught us to play, and I learned because I was kind of forced to, you could say, but had an interest, and I really wanted to play saxophone or electric guitar or something like that. But what the piano did is give me an understanding of the grid, all of the pitches in a row and what can be done. And I started writing my own pieces at that time. I was probably like 10 years old or so. And that was one path, and that led me to later enroll in university and study music that way. I thought that was what you had to do, if you wanted to make music, was study it formally. It was a very naive idea, I think. But at the same time, I was doing other kinds of experiments. I mean, I loved cassette tapes. I would record things off the radio and push the pause button as fast as possible to chop it up, like some kind of early cut up editing. I didn't, know what I was doing, but it was just another way to make sound. And I would build instruments, and I would gather my friends who lived in the same village, and we'd try to go play music. And we didn't have a place to do this, so we'd go out to the desert and play. And we weren't very good, like a bass guitar with like one string, a drum with no drum heads, just a bunch of cardboard taped to it. And I didn't know people were doing this kind of noise professionally. It was the sound I got used to. And later I said, oh, that ugly sound is actually something a lot of people do.
That's amazing. So just heading out to the desert. So when you realized that was something that other people were doing and you had a community, is that when you got more involved doing performance, getting involved in more of a broader art scene?
No. I like I said, I went to university. I thought that to be a composer, I don't know, they steer you into these professions, like you're going to go be a film composer or something. But, I always wanted to just make art and make things. I think it was later I moved to Los Angeles, went to do my MFA at Cal Arts. And there I met a bunch of other people that are doing, all kinds of whatever with sound, whether it's installations or performances or things like I was doing, making instruments, performing those, writing notes, black dots on paper, all of it. So I realized that I could do all of this at once. And from then on, I've been on the road constantly, I guess, performing or doing art projects or teaching or just making sound.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you for that background. And CHERYL, how about you? How has sound helped bring you to where you are in your practice?
I have a similar history, I suppose, to both Laura and Raven, although probably never quite as successful as either of them in being able to master an instrument or to really dedicate my life to, for instance, composition or mastering an instrument. So coming from a large family of half-breed musicians, you just contributed however you could contribute. And I also found that because I was, as a child, studying, like bel canto style voice, it just didn't feel like it was me. And so I always was trying to sort of break out of that. I was always trying to break the rules. And there wasn't any support. There was no sort of community or any sort of support whatsoever. So it just became sort of part of the expression of my own unique voice to try and break as many rules as possible and be, as Laura says, as badass as possible. So eventually I met up with some people along the way in my 20s who were art instructors at a local art college in Calgary at the time. And they encouraged me that I should maybe go to art college because they could see that I was kind of weird and quirky and, kind of all over the map. And I tried singing in bands, and that was fun, but there was a lot of weird politics I didn't appreciate. And also I have to just say, because I look quite white, like I was always being insulted. They'd always go, well, we're all white here. And I'd always be like, I'm not. And then it turned into a big political drama, and I just couldn't stand that. So going to art college kind of was an answer for me. But then I got kicked out of art college after first year because I couldn't fit into that either. But I have to say that how sound has shaped it all is that I realized later, in the years following all that although I never learned how to draw and I couldn't really render something as a way a visual artist could, it was my voice that could render things. So I could use my voice in a way to draw things. And that really became something I just focused on, and that became a strength for me.
Oh, that's such an interesting observation, to think about it that way in relationship to drawing. The next question was about sound in relation to the forming of immersive environments. That way that sound can really, I think, surround your audience. Could you speak to that a little bit more, CHERYL? Like this idea around how sound and your voice and music could take you in directions that drawing or painting couldn't?
I think that sound is a really powerful sensory agent. And in an immersive environment, you're trying to get people to somehow feel, sense things, you know. So I think, you know, etymologically, if we even look at the word audience, it implies, you know, hearing. And so, you know, using sound in that sort of immersive way is a way to kind of almost try and beckon people to become a bit more.
Oh no. Now the audio's gotten real funky. I think that microphone might be on the fritz again.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe you should unplug it.
It's for a sound panel, it sounds pretty amazing, but I don't think we could understand your last point though. Oh, now we can hear you just a little bit. So we so well timed and so interesting, but
That was beautiful.
This is the challenge of doing a Zoom session on sound with my microphone keeps crapping out, so I'm aware of that. So I'm not sure what the last point was that you didn't.
Don't throw that away when you're done with this. That's actually
well,
nice.
I've got a box of stuff that'll be heading your way. Don't worry. I don't think I said much more. I think I was more riffing off of the fact that I was enjoying watching Laura doing semaphore to something. That's all.
Feel like you created such a beautiful moment. You were talking about the sensory and talking about audience and the audio, and it is such an interesting time when we're trying to have these discussions on Zoom and we're trying to hear each other, and it all depends, what room you're in, and are there pets and children running through, and how's your microphone, do you have headset? And that really did create sort of this beautiful moment of like pause and punctum into what we were doing, and there was something super lovely about it. So like a beautiful mistake. Thank you.
Yeah, well, maybe if my voice cut out, maybe that's kind of you got to finish the end of the sentence for yourselves, and maybe that's the challenge of immersive environments. You're actually asking people to participate in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Raven, I was going to ask you about immersive environments too. I was sort of reading a little bit about everyone's practice a bit before we got started, and I came across a quote where you said that you were interested in what happens when you eliminate the parameters of music. I think you were talking about taking things to like really high decibels, and I thought about that, like what is that when you eliminate the parameters of music, and considering what CHERYL just presented us with, of like entering into suddenly this incredible moment of sound. What are your thoughts on sound in relation to that forming of an immersive environment?
Well, there might be different things going on there. Part of, at some point in my compositional process, me making scores for other musicians, I felt like there was too much freedom, maybe too much arbitrary decisions, because anything was really possible. So I started imposing limits on what I could do. Maybe there was not going to be an option of pitch or volume or rhythm or any of the parameters. So then I would start experimenting and find instruments that couldn't do these things. So for instance, I wrote this piece for guns. You know, you can't do anything with it. You can only play rhythms with it. You can't adjust the volume or the pitch. And speaking on the topic of immersive environments, I guess some of that, back to also this kind of noise idea, had to do with making some kind of immersive environment using volume. So filling up a space with sound at the sacrifice of timbre and pitch and anything else you can hear. You're just hearing volume, maybe even feeling volume. So that was my tactic for making immersive environments back then. But then eventually there were things that just ideas that wouldn't fit on a recording. You know, you can only turn up the recording so much before you blow out your speakers, or you can only play so loud before the audience is just, you know, your friends or the sound guy or the guy paying you or not paying you. So then, you know, we started thinking about other ways to present this stuff. And then I realized you could do it in an installation, and that could be the immersive environment. And then I was working with Post Commodity. I was a member of this collective for 10 years. And that was all we did, was make these immersive spaces or turn a space into a variable media environment. And those were different solutions for having this kind of experience, or this shared experience with an audience who can become more than a listener or a person who has to, you know, sit and be in an audience and watch somebody perform. And yeah, I'm still continuing that kind of work, that kind of exploration. And some of the work I end up with, I have to determine if it's going to be a recording or something I play live, or it's going to end up in a more kind of visual art context.
That's helpful to hear. And it's backing off of that and then heading over to Laura, that makes me think about the last time I saw you perform. Laura was here in Winnipeg, and you played with the Potato Gardens Band in the basement of the Hudson's Bay, which is our big department store. And it was just, the basement was emptied out, and you guys took it over and performed in the middle, and everyone was sitting around you. And it was such an incredible performance because of what you three were doing, and the sound and the rhythm and everything that was happening, but also to watch the way that the audience interacted with what you were doing, that people were listening, people were closing their eyes, people were feeling the floor. It felt like a truly immersive environment, and also to be in sort of an unexpected space was part of it. So I don't know if you want to speak to that performance in particular, or if you have some other examples of ways that your sound relates in forming those immersive environments, but I'm going to pass it to you.
There's a handful of thoughts about this, but the most outstanding is the immersive is very sensual. You know, it starts from like right here, and it's like with my violin, I can be like right here or here or here, and it's dramatically different, and here, and that's just like kind of like it kind of starts from within my own senses and gets to kind of reverb its way out of from my body to like a breath or something, you know, like and that's how I make sense of the sound, how it makes me feel, and try not to waste people's time, you know, and try and just create the atmosphere of smoke or breath or wind, or, you know, holding your breath, or, you know, and try and let that surroundings that I like to play with and for are always there. So it's kind of bouncing off. And one of my biggest muses with the violin is like this many. You know, you got the piece of wood, the history, the rosin, the bow, the horse, the holes, the strings, the touch, and just knowing it like the back of your hand. And one of my favorite things about the violin is that you can put so much rosin on the bow. So when you strike the string, soft or light or whatever you're going for, it makes this plume of rosin smoke, which I love smoke. And that kind of environment that has inspired me all these years. Yeah, I can see it from here, or if you give me a big room and fill it with smoke, like that there's a lot of information and caring in that. And I, you know, playing in a warehouse or playing in a really dark room, you know, where you can hear your own breath. And then you can, you know, keep turning it up, vibrato, Vibrato is nuancing the note just to create those waves and energy that kind of goes into your being and stuff. So I take it very physically and sensually how to create these atmospheres. Sure.
Yeah. Well, it seems, I think about the way that you use the violin, kind of creating something ethereal. And I didn't realize that you were a pedal steel player, but that one seems like such an ethereal sort of an instrument in creating something that's like the sacred steel. It's had its relationship in those ways of having going up somewhere. How long have you been playing the pedal steel?
I've been maybe about 5 years. It's a monster. I love it because you know, I was so hardcore trained as a violinist, and then kind of went my own way. And then I'm a self-taught guitarist, and I still can't wrap my head around that either. I don't know how I do it. It's just like, you know, like just kind of listen. And then I had a teacher for a while, and he told me that it seemed like maybe I was an ideal candidate to play pedal steel because of the violin training. Like I know how to go straight from here to there, like, and that just gives me great satisfaction with something so loose and wild as the steel. I love it. You play with both feet, both knees, both hands. I always joke around with people that there's a built-in ashtray. Everyone's like, really? I'm like, how many limbs do I have?
Yeah,
Smoke.
lots of moving around. We'll move on to our next question here then, which is about language. And CHERYL, I wondered if maybe you could start on this one, discussing the relationship between these immersive environments and the sound you make in language. Because I know that you have used language in your practice in various ways, as well as Laura and Raven have as well. But maybe we'll start with you and see what you'd like to share on that.
There's definitely, from a Cree worldview or Nehioin worldview, which is worldview, a relationship, a definite relationship between language and land and or environment. So in our worldview, the sound shapes that are what our language is comprised of um, is it from the land, you know? We could actually get those sound shapes and find them in the land. So there's a direct correlation. So I suppose, I'm just going to flip my page here. So I suppose, you know, since we're now in sort of more maybe urban spaces or technologically mediated spaces, it's the role of the artist to, or the role of an Indigenous artist could be, to somehow bring those sound shapes into other realms. And I think that's probably what I do in some ways. I'm trying to keep those sound shapes current and living, because that's the other thing, is that we understand from a Cree worldview that there's little glyphs that represent those sound shapes, and that they're actually little spirits, and they actually they're still living. So, you know, that's something that maybe the artist then is doing is, and what I ponder about is you know, am I still honoring them and allowing them to live, and for other people to sort of maybe in some way pick up on them, like if not literally, but just in some resonance, you know, in some sort of way in their being. Are they feeling that? Are they feeling the spiritedness of them?
Hmm. I saw you do a performance, which I think you've probably done a few times, involving the tent and the ribbons coming out, and you were speaking language, and you were speaking the word Squamish over and over again. And yeah, as an audience member, of sort of hearing the words, of understanding what you were saying, and then getting lost in the rhythm and the lyricism of it, and being drawn somewhere else outside of the physicality of that space. And it impacted so much and left that resonance with me for years. I believe it was at an ACC conference that I saw the performance.
I was just going to say, Squamish isn't a word for my language, but I remember that piece. I was trying to pick words from the language from where I'd set up the tent, and that I was saying Nitui, I say Squamish, Itui, you say, and I think it was something like Musqueam or something, and it was a way to kind of get a call and an answer going with people.
Yeah, it was a terrific performance. Yeah, really left an impact. How about we go back to Laura on this? We'll change the circuit of questions and answers. Thinking around that question about relationship between these immersive environments and language, is there a role that you find language plays in your sound art practice, in your music? Anything you want to speak to around that?
But there's a certain like magic that happens sometimes when you're you're using something where there are no words, and there's a lot of words that have never been spoken, and that's a very enjoyable route for me as a musician, and there's a relationship between what can physically happen when it is not, when there are no words. So when I'm collaborating with other artists, we bank on some ideas, but the true dialogue on communication is the chemistry between what you're singing about, what you're playing about, how it's understood, and oftentimes it takes me to places that I didn't even know were possible. I work with Raven a lot, and when we play together, it creates this new fascination for if it comes across as the way that, like in the way you play, how it really speaks to you. When I'm working with high volumes that we like to go towards, how that makes one feel, how that can move worlds, big or small. It's a huge discovery. Almost every time I get to work with great artists and stuff. That's a language that's very close, and I understand that I the voices get to be intertwined. I love that idea of the throat singing. And throat singing is just this cylindrical pattern or such, and that creates the energy of what you're trying to say. As best as you can, Sometimes it doesn't work out, and I like that too. Because it's a big old muscle of being understood or being misunderstood, or just letting it be, like like CHERYL's vocoder. It's going for it, however it comes across.
That's great, and we're going to get to sort of hopefully talking a little bit about some of the collaborations that you guys have been a part of together and outside of this particular panel. But maybe, Raven, I'll give you a chance to speak to that question as well about the way that language can be involved in the work that you've done, either with immersive environments or the work that you do with sound. And then maybe we can talk about the role of collaboration after that.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as Laura. Well, I've titled works in Dene, my traditional language. I've recorded songs where I'm singing Dene, and I've done installations with Dene language. I've also sung, in English and Spanish as well. But the reason I make music is because it doesn't have to say these things using words or language, at least on the surface. It has other voices that can relay what you want to communicate or what you want to say. And in some instances, it renders language obsolete. And that's why I like it. And that's why I use it. Those other kinds of interactions that you might have with your fellow musicians or a listener is more interesting to me sometimes. But having said that, yes, I've had titles, you know, be in Dene. We Post Commodity did a project of convoluting Indigenous languages with, you know, and analyzing accents and the colonizing effect that it has on all of our accents. So we've used language as a concept before in works, but it's a case-by-case basis, depending what I'm working on, you know, how important it is to have that extra handle that can let a listener or a viewer understand what is happening in the piece.
I just wanted to jump in and say that I really appreciate what both Raven and Laura have said, because for me, I think early on I started out as a performance artist. That was the only part of the art world that I could kind of feel comfortable in, that my physical movements and the materials or the space I was working in was some attempt to create a lexicon, you know, some attempt to create some kind of meaningful way that I was communicating something, you know, just kind of transmitting. So yeah, I really, really, really appreciate that, what both of you said about that, you know, that other language. So.
And I like what you were saying, Laura, about when you're collaborating with others and the music becomes the language of communicating with the person that you're with. Do any of you guys want to jump in on that? I think you've all had so many different kinds of collaborations in your practice. And that's such a great part about sound or music or performance, is when you do it with other people and you have those moments of connecting beyond just like a spoken language. Does anyone want to jump in on that?
I'll just jump in by saying I'm hugely envious just hearing Laura and Raven talk about their work together, because I don't think I've ever really experienced that kind of vulnerability and presence with such profoundly amazing output ever. So I'm just...
Well, we're all part of a small world of, you know, Native musicians working in across Canada and the US. So we three have overlapped many times and collaborated. And what you were saying before, I mean, it can be a beautiful thing. It depends who you're collaborating with too, right? I mean, there's, it's not always like that, but that's kind of nice too, that you can jump around and you can, again, not have the restrictions or the preparation of starting these collaborations. You can simply show up with your instrument and not say a word and start playing together. And then it has begun. And maybe you document it and maybe you don't. But yeah, I mean, Laura and I have been playing together for, I think, like 13 years now, maybe. And same thing, there's no plan. We just show up. I show up with whatever instrument I can, usually guitar. That's my opportunity to play guitar. And Laura plays a variety of instruments too, and we just show up and play, do the gig.
And over those 13 years, has it been the same? Does it change every time you guys are together playing?
I mean, it's never the same. It's because there is no plan. It's completely improvised every time. So yeah, it's always different. And the instrumentation changes slightly, different, you know, effects or different, you know, combinations of instruments. Surely different contexts too. Sometimes we get invited to the art thing. Other times it's some kind of DIY gig or noise gig. But yeah, the audience is always different too. And I mean, before, you know, I pass it on, the other thing I want to talk about is these scores I've been making. I made one for CHERYL, I made one for Laura, and I made 11 more for other Indigenous women composers and sound artists and sound thinkers. Talk
a little bit more about that. I'd love to hear more about the history around that.
Yeah, it's a piece I've been working on really since 2007, and it started as a dedication for a composer and activist and writer named Zeke Kalasha, who's Yankton, Dakota. And actually she was honored the other day because she was one of the Google Doodles. When you log into Doodle, it was her birthday. But it's good to see she's getting recognized in 2021. But this began as a dedication to her, but evolved into recognizing contemporary practitioners of experimental music and experimentation with sound. And so they're one-page graphic scores that I've written basically for my friends and heroes that are out there, and kind of portraits, I guess, of what I know about their work and what I like about their work and what I know about them as humans and Indigenous women.
That's super cool. And Laura and CHERYL, have you guys performed the score? How do you respond to it?
It was that a year and a half ago or so in Toronto?
That was 2 years ago. They four of them were premiered, and CHERYL, Laura, Suzanne Kite, and who else was with us? Carmina Escobar performed their scores 2 years ago in Toronto.
Yeah.
And Laura had a really beautiful solution for her.
I have mine right here.
Great. This is a great part of Zoom that we can
Zoom in, zoom it.
that you can run and grab it and we can look at it like that. Wow, that's stunning.
But it's, I mean, I wanted to say too, I mean, it's funny that we all overlap and we keep getting programmed together, even for this. I mean, it's beautiful. I'm not complaining, but it's nice. I mean, CHERYL has curated sound art shows before, and I was in that also. And Laura collaborates with a ton of people. And so we're always intersecting and cross collaborating, finding out of new folks who are doing things. And yeah, and it's nice that it all is such a small world.
Yeah, it does seem like a small world if you find you collaborate often with the same folks over and over again.
It's been really wonderful to keep working and playing as musician and sound and how it keeps on going through the recordings, the films, the documentation, the archiving, and does have all their own special like continuation of the collaboration in the spirit of that, and see how it sounds 10 years down the road. See how if a character is still believable, to see if what you could have done better, it's all part of my favorite process is listening to what happened, because as present as you want to be, sometimes you're still kind of like after a performance or a recording, you really have to kind of dig in if it is being captured and see where that goes, and who gets to hear it next and under what circumstances. I just shot a video yesterday or Wednesday for this festival in Norway that me and Raven are in, and I was just trying to wrap my head around the idea of audience over in Norway, and an actual live audience watching this video that I made in my studio here in Brooklyn, and wondering if is this the right step for a video and the energy that we were creating and taking into consideration. I just picture it being played over there, and that was really fun to kind of like create stuff customized for that scenario, and then it'll go on to be just like I think this online video. So it's like a nice expanse of communicating, just a lot of fun.
Well, I think that's a good question too, is sort of like as sound artists, sound-based artists and musicians, what happens next? Where do you go next in this current world with where there are maybe some restrictions and parameters? Are there new opportunities within that? Is it easier for you? Where are you guys going with your own practices, or where do you see it going for other sound artists and musicians in this current new world we live in?
I just had a solo show this last fall, and there were so many workarounds that I had to do because of the pandemic and all of the regulations. But it kind of turned out good. I was able to like use a parabolic speaker, so I was really happy that I actually got it shipped to Ravens and then and then shipped up here, or else the courier cost, it was like almost like everyone was dressed in gold lame and would hand deliver it singing. It was so expensive. But at any rate, it was really nice to get this beautiful new parabolic speaker to use as another way that I could bring audiences in without, having to touch things that needed to be cleaned afterwards. I used hyperdirectional audio, so that another way that people could be really immersed into a sound. Had to rethink a whole bunch of work. I mean, I had a VR piece that needed, instead of an Oculus Rift, the gallery just gave away Google VR, or actually knockoff, so just VR cardboard, so that every single person could experience the piece. But that meant they weren't sort of getting the full audio that the Oculus might have also afforded them. But I think there's workarounds. I think that would be my epitaph on my grave, is that there's always a workaround. There's always a way in. And I think that everyone sort of speaking to that there's always these parameters, but then, it's the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when any of us will be able to gig again. So I know a lot of friends and colleagues are preparing for that. We don't know what's going to happen there. So it is a good time to revisit the art of making recordings and putting out albums and so forth. I'm not a fan of watching, I'm definitely not a fan of playing a Zoom concert. I can't honestly say I'm a fan of watching Zoom concerts either. But I have noticed that there's been some attention to making videos, music videos that are more kind of contained and not necessarily live. They're more kind of, let's say, music video, for lack of a better word. And I appreciate that. I think that might be a way to go forward. And for myself, that was actually what I first wanted to study in university. Was I had studied film a little bit because I thought maybe that'd be a viable career for some reason. And so I've gotten back into that. I mean, my whole career has been working with videos, so I've kind of stepped that up and am interested in combining that with making sound and see where that goes.
And Laura, how about you? I feel like, did you do a performance where you collaborated with Jeffrey Gibson this summer on a pyramid?
Yeah, that was in July. Super hot out, greasy, sweaty, socially distanced hotness. And it was a dream because it was the first live show I got to play after quarantine and after everything. And I live here alone. I'm single. I play mostly as a solo musician, anyways. So I was feeling very happy to be able to work with Jeffrey and to play outside and be socially distanced with other Indigenous women that were part of the whole event, and was playing on this giant mound structure, ziggurat, as he describes, along the river, which is a dream of mine. No matter what, I've always wanted to live and play along the river, wherever it is, the Mississippi or East Fork, anywhere. And I live on a really loud street here called Flatbush Avenue, and I've always called it my river. And I sit out my fire escape and watch the traffic go by like it's they're like little canoes or something. and And to be together after being so isolated and playing outdoors after 3 rain days. The sun finally came out on that last day. And I just remember being up there and just seeing the sun and the sparkling water and the colorful mound and seeing my friends way off in the grass and just being like this. I have never played or felt like this before. And it was well documented and it's like one of those cases where yeah you revisit what happened and it just recaptures those feelings and beyond. um, so it's been really um, that to go back in after isolation was something like that. I can't believe it happened that way. um, and I'm working on more soundtracks than I ever have in my entire life, which has been really fun too, because it's just been, it's I do everything myself, but then working with the editors and directors, like customizing these environments, um, faster, slower, darker, brighter. Like I like to work fast and just dig right in and scrap it if you have to, and it gives my my memory muscle of all these communities and gatherings for music and performance. It still is alive. It's different ways right now, but it's still kind of that collective spirit that I've known since I was little.
Can I
Oh,
just
go
add
ahead.
too? I wanted to say that luckily, I think maybe I sort of hung up or decided to stop performing when I started working on a PhD, which I'm kind of in the last stretch of. So when Raven invited me to interpret the score that he had written for me, that was a kind of a rare opportunity to get to perform again, and it was and actually I think the thing I wanted to say about it as well that was really I loved so much was a lot of times when you're performing, in my world, you're singing a song, and you're singing your song, and you're being present with that melody and with that rhythm and those words. So this was a real beautiful opportunity to kind of to source something that I heard when I was a young girl thinking about sound. I could hear these kind of edges of my voice that you don't really use too much when you're trying to sing nice, right? So I think that was a real beautiful thing that Raven gave me that opportunity to interpret the score and play to those edges. But luckily I haven't been suffering about not getting gigs because I stopped being a touring musician a long time ago.
It's certainly a challenging time for artists across the board, but I so appreciate hearing all of your voices on this and speaking through some of these questions. Maybe we'll wrap it up there unless anyone has anything else that they want to add on any topic we didn't touch on as musicians and sound artists on collective tuning.
Well, one thing from what little I know about playing with other musicians is that it's really less about making sound and more about listening. That's just the thing I've realized, and that has profound impact and than everything else if you can kind of think about everything that way.
Yeah, that's a good teaching for all of us on all levels, more about listening. Thank you. Thank you, CHERYL. Thank you, Raven. Thank you, Laura. And I'll let you guys go about your day now.
Yeah, good to see you all. Happy
Great
to
to see you.
Yeah,
everybody's doing good.
good to see everyone. Yeah, hi, kisses to everyone.